In 1957, the suburbs were an endless tableau of perfect lawns and blinding white picket fences. This was the promised land for men like Arthur Jenkins, a regional sales manager who believed his life was a testament to the American dream. And the absolute centerpiece of that dream? His wife, Eleanor Jenkins. Eleanor, her dresses were pressed, her pies were legendary, and her devotion to Arthur was, by all appearances, absolute. But behind that perfect facade, beneath the calm surface of that idyllic home on Elmwood Lane, a deeply unsettling truth was taking root. A darkness was lurking. Arthur, in those early, blissful years, noticed only the sunshine. He saw the spotless kitchen, the fresh carnations, the woman who greeted him every day with a kiss that tasted of mint and domestic contentment. He had no reason to suspect that the same hands that baked his morning biscuits were preparing something utterly unforgivable. This documentary doesn't just tell the story of a marriage gone terribly wrong. It is the forensic examination of how the most familiar person in your life can become the most feared. It is the account of how Arthur Jenkins slowly, horrifyingly, realized his ideal wife was not the homemaker he adored, but the monster he now had to escape. Stay with us. The clock is ticking on Elmwood Lane. The Jenkins home was a monument to flawless domesticity. Every cushion was plumped, every cabinet was polished, and every meal Eleanor prepared was a testament to her devotion. This was not a house, it was a stage set. Arthur Jenkins, by his own account, was one of the luckiest men in America. He had a challenging job, a comfortable salary, and a wife who seemed to have stepped right off a magazine cover. He loved her precisely because she was so meticulous, so ordered. He saw her perfection as a sign of her love for him. But true horror often hides in plain sight, disguised as a virtue. Eleanor's meticulous nature was not merely a love of neatness, it was an obsession with control. The pantry was alphabetized. The silverware drawer was arranged by size and function, each piece perfectly aligned. And when Arthur complimented her on her efficiency, he was simply praising the engine of her control. He never thought to ask why she insisted on doing the family's laundry late at night, in the solitary quiet of the basement. He simply enjoyed the fresh, clean scent of his shirts in the morning. He never questioned why she had two identical butcher knives, one for the kitchen and one that was, mysteriously, always missing. He assumed she had misplaced it. The truth is, Eleanor was a woman of routine, and every routine has a dedicated tool. Arthur was living in a bubble of blissful ignorance, protected by a crisp cotton apron and the sweet scent of lemon polish. But the bubble was starting to stretch thin. Soon, he would have to look away from the sunshine and into the shadows. The small cracks in the veneer began to appear, not as large structural failures, but as fleeting moments that Arthur couldn't quite dismiss. It started, as these things often do, with an inconsistency. He caught Eleanor reading books that were far outside the realm of her usual home economics library. Titles on human anatomy, preservation techniques, and, strangest of all, books about forgotten rural crafts involving deep, precise cuts. He'd ask her about them, and her answer was always the same, delivered with a flat, empty smile. Just catching up on history, dear. The refrigerator, once a source of comfort, became a source of mild anxiety. Arthur noticed the quantity of raw meat Eleanor brought home seemed excessive for two people. She insisted she was freezing batches for the winter, but the freezer never seemed to fill up. She was particular about which cuts she preferred, only the leanest, the freshest, the kind you had to special order from a specific, obscure butcher shop 40 minutes out of town. He started associating her most precise, gentle touches with a cold sense of dread. The way her fingers handled the carving fork at Sunday dinner, the unnervingly steady control. This wasn't efficiency, this was mastery. Fear is an incremental emotion. It doesn't arrive as a scream, it arrives as a whisper that builds to a roar. Arthur's questions started to become less innocent. He began to check the locks on the old utility room in the back of the garage. He'd find it locked, but the air around the door always felt heavy, with a faint, metallic scent he couldn't identify. His sleep became fractured. He'd wake up convinced Eleanor wasn't beside him. He'd hear faint shuffling sounds coming from downstairs, or sometimes from the garage. When he asked her the next morning, she'd assure him it was just her starting her famous early morning baking. And her cakes were always perfect, always there to silence his doubt. This psychological tug-of-war was the terror of his new reality. He knew something was fundamentally wrong with his perfect wife, yet every piece of evidence could be logically explained away by her unrelenting dedication to homemaking. It left him questioning his own sanity, which is, perhaps, exactly what Eleanor intended. Desperate for answers, Arthur took the investigation outside the house. He started to pore over microfiche at the public library, looking for any link. He focused on recent disappearances in neighboring towns. He focused on a tragic case 30 miles away, a missing man named Walter from a nearby town. He became convinced this was it. Eleanor must be part of a larger ring, a cult, or a group operating in the shadows. He spent weeks chasing this theory, obsessively charting the travel time to the next town, looking for clues in their old Ford sedan. It was a dead end, a crucial narrative detour that kept him looking everywhere but where the danger truly resided. He was looking for a complicated conspiracy when the most terrifying answer was sitting at his own dinner table. The terrifying secret wasn't a town away. It was right under his nose. And it was packed neatly, waiting for him. The turning point came not in a flash of violence, but in a moment of mundane housekeeping. Eleanor had asked Arthur to clear out some forgotten items from the back of the garage shelves. A simple chore, meant to reinforce the narrative of their ordered life. Hidden behind a stack of old paint cans was a plain, rusted metal lunchbox. It looked like something a child might have taken to school decades ago, a relic that didn't belong to their meticulous existence. Arthur reached for it, annoyed at the extra chore. It was heavier than it should have been. It didn't rattle like empty metal. Arthur's mind, primed by weeks of quiet suspicion, went immediately to the improbable. Was it money? Was it a family heirloom? He wrestled with the clasp, but the metal had seized with age. With a forceful jerk, it finally popped open. The surprise was not that it contained tools, but the type of tools. Not hammers and wrenches, but implements of frightening surgical precision. They were polished, organized, and utterly foreign. As the lid sprang back, a forgotten, wickedly sharp hook, a tool for separating tissue, caught Arthur on the forearm. A single, clean cut, and on the blade, a glistening, dark residue that was not rust. In that instant, every nervous glance, every strange smell, every question about the missing knife snapped into sickening focus. This was not a treasure box. This was a murder kit. And his wife, Eleanor, was the technician. The cut was shallow, but the shock was profound. Arthur wrapped his arm, driven not by pain, but by a sudden, paralyzing fear. He knew he had to call the authorities, but he first had to prove it. He needed irrefutable evidence that couldn't be explained away as his fevered imagination. His steps were guided by the metallic scent he had noticed before, now much stronger, coming from the rarely used fruit cellar at the back of the basement. He found the door, old, heavy, and secured by a new, industrial-grade padlock. This was not a domestic precaution. This was a vault. He broke the lock, and the door sighed inward. The air that rushed out was cold, thick, and laced with the smell of iron and bleach. This was not a cellar. It was a workspace. The low-wattage bulb revealed a room stripped of all domestic warmth. Everything was designed for efficiency, easy-to-clean surfaces, heavy-duty hooks, and a chemical sanitation system. There were no piles of meat for freezing. There was only Eleanor's horrific hobby, laid out for her latest project. Arthur Jenkins was now staring into the face of his wife's unspeakable obsession. Arthur's blood ran cold, but his survival instinct was screaming. He knew he had minutes, perhaps less, to get out. The terror wasn't the room. The terror was the realization that Eleanor could walk through the door at any second. He raced upstairs, his feet pounding on the treads that Eleanor had so meticulously varnished. He got to the landline, dialing the operator, his voice a panicked, useless croak. And then he heard it. The soft, but unmistakable sound of the garage door closing outside. She was home. Eleanor was back from her errand. Arthur dropped the phone, the receiver dangling by its cord, emitting a useless dial tone. His initial fear of exposure was replaced by the raw, animal need to disappear. He fled to the kitchen, seeking the back door, but stopped dead. He could hear her footsteps, unhurried, purposeful, moving from the front hall towards the heart of the house. She was not rushing. She was hunting. Arthur was trapped, less than 40 feet from freedom, knowing that the woman he had pledged his life to was now ready to end it. Arthur was trapped. He pressed himself against the pantry door, tasting dust and despair. He could hear Eleanor's footsteps, and worse, the humming. The sound was gentle, domestic, and utterly disconnected from the horror he knew she represented. It was the sound of a woman contentedly finishing her chores. He needed an exit, a weapon, anything. But the perfection of the house was its own trap. There was nothing out of place, nothing to use. And then, the humming stopped. Arthur. Her voice was sweet, a little sing-song. Did you forget your keys, dear? The garage door was open. She knew. She was playing with him. The game was no longer about discovery. It was about survival. He backed away slowly, silently, toward the kitchen table, seeking cover. The perfect housewife was now merely a predator, and her home was the hunting ground. Cornered by the refrigerator, Arthur finally found his voice, a raw whisper of denial. But Eleanor didn't want denial. She wanted an audience for her terrible confession. It's about quality, Arthur. You buy cheap steak, you get gristle. You buy the finest, you get perfection. I cannot abide sloppiness. And people are messy. They leave loose ends. They leave stains. She explained her obsession, not with mania, but with chilling logic. She saw the world as corrupted, full of flaws that needed to be trimmed away. Her tools, her secret room, it was all about achieving her own unsettling, terrifying version of order. The flesh was just the medium, the control was the purpose. You were messy, too, Arthur. You kept wanting to know why the meat tasted so fresh. Why I made the soup from scratch. You were a loose thread, dear. And I cannot have loose threads in my perfect life. The veneer was gone. The housewife was a killer. Arthur lunged. This was not a fight between a husband and a wife. It was a desperate battle between a man fighting for his life and a cold, calculating machine. He knocked the knife from her hand, sending it skittering across the linoleum. But she was relentless, driven by the need to complete her final, most personal cleanup. He managed to land a blow, sending her stumbling back against the wall, but he knew she wouldn't stop. He made a break for the front door, the final barrier between him and the outside world. Did he make it? Did the heavy deadbolt click into place just in time? Or did Eleanor's perfect, deadly aim find its mark, making Arthur Jenkins the final, forgotten ingredient in her perfect, terrifying home? The silence that follows a struggle is often louder than the violence itself. The fate of Arthur Jenkins remains an open, sickening question. Did he manage to get the front door open, slamming it behind him and racing into the terrified night? Or did he simply become the last, permanent fixture of Eleanor's perfect, controlled home? The true horror of this story is not the tools Eleanor kept in the lunchbox, but the mask she wore for years. She was the ideal neighbor, the perfect wife, the proof that the most monstrous entity might be sleeping in the bedroom right next to you. The terror is in the unseen, the cold, calculating intelligence that operates entirely without a conscience. We are left to wonder, how many other loose threads did Eleanor cut from the fabric of their perfect suburban community? And who cleans up the cleanup crew? All right, horror hounds, the story of the dangerous housewife ends here, but your speculation begins now. I need to know your theories. Look back at those unsettling images we shared. What was her plan for Arthur once he was contained? Did he survive the night? Or is there another mystery beneath the clean concrete of the Jenkins fruit cellar? Drop your theories in the comments section below. I'll be reading and responding to the most chilling possibilities. If you were terrified by the cold logic of Eleanor Jenkins, then you won't want to miss next week's Deep Cut, where we explore the bizarre case of the gardener of Groom Lake, a story of plants, soil, and things that definitely should not grow. You made it through a full hour of domestic terror. Thank you for watching. Don't let the next nightmare pass you by. Be sure to like this video right now to support the channel, and click that subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified for more chilling stories just like this one.